So if you're a gamer, regardless of what you play and how much you're into, you've most likely heard of this series at least once or twice. The infamous, ball-bustingly difficult, satisfyingly rewarding, and genre-defying series where you die, and I don't know, fucking die. Dark Souls. I started playing these games during the beginning of the fun times, and during my spare time, I played through the whole trilogy of Dark Souls for the first time, and I can confidently claim that I am now a Soulsborne fan. If you've been following the channel for a while, I've made 2 videos on Platinum games and their bosses, so I figured that I'd give some love for a series that I have grown very fond of over the past couple of years and rank some of my favorite Soulsborne bosses of all time. I know, this idea has been done to death before by other artists, but this video is special because I know what it's like to be funny. Oh fuck, that just sort of popped out, didn't it? Please disregard that and don't take me seriously, I love all of you. Please laugh at me. Also, I want to mention that for this video, and to build up hype for Elden Ring, I ended up replaying every single Soulsborne game from beginning to end, recording all my playthroughs, and fighting every boss in the series for the video, including Elden Ring. Which, by the way, that took up over 2 terabytes of storage space on my computer. I worked hella hard on this shit for y'all. The least you could do is give me a bit of credit, goddammit. Anyways, I'm ranking my top 15 favorite Soulsborne bosses because I really want to talk about a lot of these fights, and because I really want to get the most out of these 2 fucking terabytes of storage, okay? But there's those pesky rules to address first. First of all, only bosses from Software games, if that wasn't clear enough. The only exception for the list is Sekiro, because I never finished it as of the time of this recording. I didn't like it my first time, but I'm crossing around and I'm currently playing through it as we speak. Not really, but you get what I mean. Though I will include bosses from Elden Ring. Second, for the sake of variety and to not show any bias towards any particular games, I'm gonna include at least 1 boss from each of these 5 games. Anyways, let's go ahead and see what the monstrosities that Ellie, Nozomi, the other Nozomi, it's Yohane, and Oog had to face off against. So for the beginning of this ranking, I feel like it's best to talk about, well, the beginning. I technically started my Soulsborne train with Demon Souls back in 2013, but I never got around to playing it all the way through until the PS5 remake came out. So of course this is the last game in the series I finished before Elden Ring, and the challenge level was practically non-existent for me as a result, but I do still really enjoy the game quite a lot for the most part. The soundtrack, at least in the remake anyway, the world design, and an atmosphere that most horror games can't match up to, I still believe that this is a great Souls game that you should definitely try out if you're interested, especially with that PS5 remake. But you don't have one of them, do you? Although I must say now, I really don't like the item capacity system. The AI is laughably bad in some areas, and the boss roster, compared to the other games, has aged very poorly. Not because of the lore or designs, for the most part anyway, but you can really tell that this was the first game in this series, since the bosses center on a unique gimmick instead of being a good gameplay experience overall. Not to say that all of them are like that. In fact, there were a couple of genuinely good fights in the game that have a good balance of uniqueness and gameplay, and this one really shines brighter than most of them. I guess you could say it towered over the competition. I 100% picked this boss in order to make that joke, and I'm not sorry. Man, talk about a complete change in scope with this boss fight. The first boss of the game was a giant blob creature protected by a phalanx of smaller blobs. Then the second boss of Boletaria Castle is a giant suit of armor the size of a double-decker bus. This is also technically the gatekeeper of Boletaria Palace, and by extension the rest of the game. He steps up to the plate and says, "Hey, you're pretty okay to kill the phalanx, but if you want to continue this game, then you're gonna have to get past me, bitch." And sorry to jump ahead here a bit, but this is definitely my favorite fight in the game for several reasons. First of all, the design is spectacular. I love how the opening cutscene manages to demonstrate the power, scope, and intimidation of the knight himself. And in the remake in particular, they improved his sound design significantly by making his body screech like metal whenever he moves, almost as if you were fighting an actual moving metal structure itself. It doesn't seem like much, but little touches like this really add to the charm and personality of the Tower Knight itself. And the battle itself is pretty good. I mean, you have to deal with some douchey archers first if you want this fight to be fair, but it's still a pretty intense fight, if a little on the easy side. All of his attacks are very slow, but they do have some pretty good reach, and most of them really fucking hurt. I mean, no shit. And the only way you can do any damage to him is by being an ankle biter. Literally. It's definitely very simple, but it's very satisfying taking him down David and Goliath style, especially since this was the beginning of the series. Also, shout out to the music for the fight itself. Even though I think the soundtrack for the original is really bad by today's today's standards, but the songs used in both versions for this boss fight are some of the best pieces of music in the entire game, adding to the tension and grand scope of the battle itself. Although there are a couple small things that keep this fight from being any higher in my opinion. One, the aforementioned archers can really slow the pace down at the beginning of the fight, and they can make getting this game's platinum trophy incredibly fucking irritating, assuming you even care about that. And though it's very unlikely, if you knock him down against the wall or something, then there's a pretty good chance his head will clip to the wall, forcing you to wait for him to get back up, wasting your time. This is exactly why we don't drink an entire case of beer in one night, asshole. Now get off your ass so I can fucking kick it! Ow. Now I think there's a couple other bosses in this game such as the Penetrator that are more fun in terms of gameplay, and the Storm King for its impressive scope, but you can't deny that the Tower Knight definitely leaves quite the towering impression in both areas that most of the bosses in Demon Souls can. However you feel about the Man-Eater's boss fight from Demon Souls, you have to at least respect what it has done for the Soul series by being the grandfather of gank bosses. Or at least that's what some people say. Whether or not that was a good thing is a different story. And it has also given birth to some pretty good 2v1 boss battles. For example, I am so sorry if I awakened any PTSD flashbacks because of this. So when I said that the Tower Knight was the gatekeeper of Altoria Castle, Ornstein and Smough are basically the gatekeepers to, well, the rest of the fucking game. You're tasked by one of the primordial serpents to collect the Lord Vessel so you can fight the four lords and take on the big bitch himself, Gwyn. The only other fight before this that forced you to fight multiple opponents were the Bell Gargoyles, and those guys were certainly no slouch. But these guys make everything else before them and most bosses after look really easy by comparison. Instead of two gargoyles with slow attacks and flamethrowers, it's one giant chunky chunk fuck that looks like he can use a few trips to the gym, and one really fast knight that zips and zooms around like Sonic Heghorg in a suit of armor. Yeah, good luck with that shit. This fight's already hard enough, but what makes this fight truly special compared to other gank bosses is that you can't just pick one off then take the other one on solo. When one of them dies, the other one absorbs the other's powers and becomes even stronger. If you kill Smough first, then you see Ornstein respecting his fallen comrade and grows up in size as he vows to take you down. Man, what a true comrade. That's honestly kind of sweet. Meanwhile, Smough over here is just like, I'll smash it with a hammer! It is a very cool concept and execution that some bosses in future games would try to follow up on, and regardless of who you kill first, you're guaranteed to get a pretty fun fight that repeatedly kicks you in the dick with steel-toed boots. However, I must admit that I find this boss fight to be slightly overrated compared to what half the community is saying. Top 5 best in the series, eh, Democracy? As fucking if. The fight's still good, don't get me wrong, it's on here for a reason, but there's two reasons I feel this way. One, as you'll see, I think there's at least one other fight in the series that does what this fight did a bit better in terms of combat, and two, the only way to make this fight easier is by camping behind pillars and baiting out attacks from the two opponents. You have to basically exploit the game's AI to win the first half. Now I know that the pillars in the arena are the one thing that keeps this fight from being straight up bullshit, but the gargoyles are still a decent fight without having to use the environment, and it just looks silly seeing the marshmallow run into a pillar for no reason. Though I can't help agree that this was the first gank boss to be something special and do the formula right. And you'll definitely have some hair on your balls after you beat them. For every victory against them is a very well-deserved one. So, Dark Souls 2. Now, what did I think about this one? Well, despite my many gripes, I actually liked the game quite a bit for the most part. And the small improvements to gameplay over the first game, the concept of the lore centering around the player character, though very flawed idea, and defeats the purpose of the world around you mattering, it's still pretty okay on its own right. Don't get me wrong, this is easily my least favorite game in this series, as it has too many things that irritate the hell out of me, hero-style levels of annoying, like the fact that they cut your invincibility frames in half, forcing you to invest in the broken agility stat just to not get clipped all the time. The world connectivity makes no logical sense whatsoever, starting off with only one Estus flask was kind of a dick move, and some bullshit enemy placements that make some segments straight up painful to go through. And while I liked some of the bosses in Dark Souls 2, most of the bosses in this game are decent yet forgettable, or some of the worst bosses I've ever faced. But thankfully the DLC is here, and it brought about some bosses that can contest with some of the best in the series, and one of those is the widely acclaimed Sir Alonne. See Dark Souls 2, this is how you pull off a boss fight. It only took you 40 hours to even get here, but you did it anyways, and you did it well. Now here's a golden star for not being a complete waste of my fucking time. So, Sir Alonne is the secret final boss of the Iron King DLC that you can only fight after you defeat the Fume Knight. Again, sorry for bringing back any PTSD flashbacks. I ended up playing through the game a second time for this video, and I remember this being the boss I was looking forward to the most. And sure enough, this fight definitely lives up to the hype. Most of the bosses in Dark Souls 2 can be quite a breeze either because of the agility stat being busted or some broken shield builds that I know literally nothing about, but Sir Alonne isn't one of them. This fight is hard as hell. Since he's a samurai, he's got a lot of quick sword swings and lunge attacks with very tricky timing, and a lot of his attacks can inflict bleed onto you and kill you very easily if you get careless. However, the path to the boss is why he isn't any higher for me. You travel through a memory full of those damn Alonne Knights and these weird gecko creatures, and it's such an annoying slog. But at least the fight itself was super fun, and he's one of the few bosses in the game to have any decent lore. So Sir Alonne was once a soldier who traveled from another land to serve the Iron King, and it was in fact Sir Alonne's influence that led the Iron King's soldiers to become a hybrid of medieval knights and samurai warriors. Yeah, thanks for that by the way. And fun fact about this boss fight, if you kill him without taking a single hit, then he will kill himself by committing seppuku, which you didn't have to add that in, but I admit that's a pretty nice touch, giving off that samurai vibe right there. I may hate the pathway to the boss given how obnoxious the enemies are, but I never got frustrated nor angry no matter how many times I died to Alonne himself, and that's the sign of a great boss fight right there. If I ever replay Dark Souls 2 again, which I probably won't, then I know the boss I'll be the most excited to fight against. So I'm just gonna say it now, since I'm gonna make it obvious the further we go in, but Dark Souls 3 is my favorite Souls game of the trilogy, and my third favorite game in Soulsborne history. And admittedly, I made this video partially so I can low-key gush about this game and its bosses. Spoiler warning, because the bosses in this game are so good! From the intense beginning fight with Gundyr and Vort of the Boreal Valley, to the crazy but fun DLC bosses, most of the boss fights are up there with Platinum Games' best as some of the best bosses I've faced in a game. So imagine my anguish with just having to pick a small handful of them from this game. Hell, I legit facepalmed when I forgot to add this boss to my list originally. You thought that Vort was super bizarre and crazy? Well, just wait until you meet his girlfriend next door. But seriously, don't quote me on that. So Vort was an introduction to the residents of Irithyll of the Boreal Valley with his weird nature, and he was just a taste of the weird shit you were gonna get into with that area. But honestly, none of that could have ever prepared you for the Dancer. In contrast to Vort with his incredibly aggressive bull-like nature, you'd notice just how quiet and eerie the Dancer is herself, and that's even reflected with the music, as the first half of the music reflects the calm and analytical nature of the Dancer herself. Then the second phase appears where she pulls out a second sword where the momentum picks up. The way the fight goes on, it's almost like you're participating in a dance rather than an actual fight, and even though she's trying to kill you, which she will because this fight is really damn hard, she really puts her best out there and moves around so gracefully, like an actual dancer would. Of course, there's her backstory that is pretty damn dark, and I don't feel like talking about it, so go check out Vadi Video for some lore shit. I don't know what to tell you. But outside of Dark Souls 3's brilliant combat, what makes this fight truly brilliant actually lies in her attack patterns, not specifically in the way she moves, but you slowly realize how different the timings are compared to the rest of the enemies in the game, and that all has to do with the music. I already loved this fight before, but it was when I saw this video by Game Theory that honestly blew my mind when I first watched it, and it just made me love the fight even more. And this game didn't get nominated for Game of the Year. If anything, the only complaint I have about the Dancer is that the hit detection on her grab here is a little janky. It just lingers for so long and it makes you think, oh bullshit. Though she really only does it in the first phase of the fight, and she telegraphs it ahead of time, so if you get hit by it, it is pretty much your fault. So all in all, this is just one of the many reasons I love this game so much, and this is one dance I look forward to in each playthrough. The Dancer's blades fucking suck though. Okay, start of a new DLC area, in an area surprisingly adjacent to the kiln. What is this visual design? Can I get more of it? Oh, so this is basically the Earthen Peak or some shit? That dumbass poison level from Dark Souls 2? Fucking hell, what the hell are those things? God damn it, Pharaoh, keep flashbacks and big chunks won't stop trying to slash my ass. Okay, cool, I'm at the end of the level. Oh, there's a message. Take the plunge, you won't die. Okay, game, I trust you. Whee! Oh, wow, it's pretty dark and dank down here, but at least I won't. You lied to me, game. Well, at least I didn't have to die due to broken ankles. But really, who would believe a convincing message such as this coming from Dark Souls of all things? I don't know how much of a contentious pick this is compared to everything else we've seen so far, but this is my list, I'm picking whatever I want, damn it. Hell, I'll even throw the bed of chaos on here if I wanted to. Yeah, never mind. So, what's up with this random as hell scenario? Well, in Prince Lorien's lore, he went on to fight off the demons of the Dreg Heap and proceeded to kill them all. No, he didn't. He became crippled from the battle, and his sword became permanently enveloped by the flames of the Demon Prince, but at least the demons are now a forgotten and extinct species. So, who wants to tell him the bad news? Again, this may be a contentious pick, but fuck it, this fight is fun as hell. It's yet another gank boss similar to Ornstein and Smough, but this is probably the first one since the first game ever to do gank boss formula in a similar fashion. Although I vastly prefer this one mainly for the better combat of Dark Souls 3, but also because this boss fight doesn't require you to abuse any lack of brain cells in order to win the first phase. The demon in pain always starts off with ranged attacks that put you into the toxic status effect, while the demon from below is pissed off constantly and tries to rush you down. But it's thankfully never cheap, as you always know when the other demon is going to spew you with poison thanks to that oh so convenient smoke trail on the ground. The demons do switch styles throughout the fight, where the burning one extinguishes itself by exploding, and you always know when the other demon is getting fired up, because they let out this really eerie screech sound that is honestly creepier than most monster sounds I've heard in horror games. I mean, sure, they do share the same attacks across the board, but personally, I don't mind it all that much as it fits in with the lore and it makes learning the fight that much easier. And the demons do have some visual distinctions that keep you from forgetting who's who. Oh damn, you have that checked out recently, buddy? The second phase only starts whenever you kill both demons. Victory achieved, right? Right? Oh fuck. So when the last demon dies off, they become revived as the strongest demon of all, except not really, the Demon Prince. And just like the ONS fight from the first game, the way the Demon Prince fights is dependent on which demon you kill first. Kill the demon in pain first, the prince will be heavily melee focused, but have that stupid laser meme from the 2010s era as his strongest attack. Where if you kill the demon from below first, then the prince has more ranged attacks, including a severe anxiety-inducing magma spirit bomb. Like, holy fuck, when did this become a cursed DBZ episode from hell? Obviously, I prefer the DFB version of this boss fight since the attacks are more manageable and way more interesting. This fight is just so fun, you guys. Is this pick bias? 100%. I'm not saying otherwise. Even if the area before the fight is complete ass, this is the part of the level I look forward to the most, and I know I'm in for one hell of a fun time. The Elden Ring. Oh, Elden Ring. Brilliant. Its hype and bosses, they burn brighter than you could possibly imagine. Don't tell me you think it's overhyped, because you're objectively wrong, you uncultured swine. Yeah, that wasn't made clear enough. I loved my time with Elden Ring, and I honestly think it's my favorite open world game of all time. And assuming that stupid cheesy intro I just pulled off didn't say that enough, I think that the bosses in this game are, like Dark Souls 3, on par with Platinum Games' best bosses of all time. Or at least the main bosses are, and more unique fights that don't get recycled with barely any changes done to make them stand out. Though, for as hard as it was for me to pick for this list, one of those that ended up getting reused for the main story managed to stand out for me, but in a good way. So imagine if you wanted to be Elden Lord, but then you had to murder a giant and break his leg for good measure because you're an asshole, then came back after you set the world on fire and this dude was your final obstacle. Hulk Hogan with an axe and a scary lion ghost on his shoulder. Nah fam, there's only room for one Elden Ring up here and... ah fuck. Nah fam, there's only room for one Elden Lord up here in this bitch. And yeah, this dude really shows that his title isn't just for show. Now before you fought Morgoth at the capital earlier in the game, you had to fight a hologram version of Godfrey in his first phase. But that was just a taste of the shit you were about to deal with in this fight. He has that giant axe that he swings around, stomps that shatter the earth and later turn into area-wide shockwaves, and he splits the earth in two with his giant axe that can one-shot you if your vigor is as low as a Sonic fan's mood after Sonic Frontiers comes out later this year. I actually fought this guy after beating defeating Malenia, and I didn't expect to get my ass handed to me as much as I did. It's an ultimate test of your knowledge and reflexes, and it's undoubtedly some of the most fun boss action in the entire game, but then you get him down to his second phase and he straight up murders his lion ghost companion. No, I will not be showing that cutscene to you, and you should thank me, that scene is genuinely upsetting, where he turns into Shido from Persona 5 just to put a stop to you. He actually had that ghosty goo in order to hold himself back in battle because his fellow comrades were so scared of him, and you should be scared of him now if you weren't already before. He's way stronger, faster, that one pile driver move just fucks your health bar no matter how high it is, and he just pulls anime nonsense out of his ass. Yeah, if there was a wrestling anime fan on the dev team that snuck some anime bullshit into this game when no one was looking, then I'd say that this guy was proof enough. Especially with how he slows down for a brief moment and you don't somehow when he does his running grapple move. I'm surprised it took them this long to implement cinematic stuff like this into a boss fight. Overall, if the other super hard bosses in this game like Mohg and Malenia didn't put some hair on your chest and some other areas will get me demonetized if I say them, then this guy definitely will. You absolutely killed it, Godfrey. And me. Several times. You deserve to be on the top 10 of this list for sure.
They've tarnished thy strength befits same crown.
So, back to Dark Souls 1. In the opening, it introduces us to Gwyn and the Four Lords, or I mean 3 out of 4 Lords, defeating the dragons in a bloody war and creating the Kingdom of Lordran. But there's also mention of the fermented pygmy. A sad, lonely hollow forgotten by all. Well, here he is now as a weird moose creature with Mr. Fantastic limbs. Feel old yet? So I've been going back and forth on my picks for which bosses I was going to pick from the first Dark Souls. While not the best roster amongst the games, there are still plenty of bosses that could easily make the list. But one that I was certain about slapping on here is Manus, Father of the Abyss. In my opinion, this is the most fun boss fight in the entire game and a solid enough final boss for the DLC. Most iconic? No, it's just a personal thing and I like making my audiences mad from time to time. You could argue that Manus was a prototype for bosses in future Souls games given his attack patterns, and I'd believe you. He's one of the hardest fights in the game for sure. As I'm sure you guess, he's a magic user that's extremely fast and hits really fucking hard. Wait, what? How was a big lumbering creature like that suddenly turning into Sanic Heghorg? Well, I mean, Dark Souls be Dark Souls, and if you thought that Sanctuary Guardian was hard, you'll probably never get to this boss. He has that stretchy limb that is very difficult to react to, and he has a combo attack that's surprisingly difficult to dodge and deals a ton of damage. Not only that, he has magic spells that are also difficult to dodge, shocker, with orbs that spawn around you and home in on you, and he sprays an innuendo right in your face. Plus, he gets bonus points for being one of the few fights in the game that doesn't get wrecked by Poise Beast builds. See what I mean when I say he was basically a prototype boss? He's unlike anything you fought in the game before. But because of that, he's one of the more fun fights in the series, and as a result, one of the most satisfying in the first game. What's more is that Manus was not only the spawn of the Abyss, arguably the root of all bad things after the war, but after he dies, he splits himself up and creates shards of darkness that manifest as dark emotions. And those same shards take the form of queens that are mostly responsible for the destruction and chaos of many kingdoms in Dark Souls 2 and 3's DLC. See, there's the payoff for linking Dark Souls 1 and 2 together. You just had to hide it behind a paywall now, didn't you? And it was also Manus' corruption and victory over Artorias that turned the once brave knight into what you saw earlier. Oh, and speaking of Artorias, I don't know how much of a contentious placement this is, but here he is, the best boss in the first Dark Souls game, Artorias the Abysswalker. Yes, I know his health bar says Knight Artorias, but Artorias the Abysswalker sounds way cooler. I even typed it in as his name in my script, so how about you all line up and kiss my ass? So I bet that if you've never played a Dark Souls game, you wouldn't have known this, but Dark Souls was actually heavily inspired by the manga series Berserk. From the myriad of enemy designs and parallel mood and setting as Berserk, they were inspired by this dark and gritty manga, and there isn't a single piece of evidence to support that claim better than Artorias, as he's basically guts. Yeah, bet you didn't know that. Both are regarded as powerful swordsmen in a dark, bleak, demon-infested world. They both wield dummy-thick swords. Artorias' design and official art are similar to Guts' wolf armor, the fact that they lose the use of their left arms. The main difference, of course, is that Guts still continues to fight for his life with his humanity intact, while Artorias has already succumbed to the darkness, mindlessly slaughtering traces of the Abyss wherever he may find it, which shows what Guts could have become if he had failed. Seriously, go check out some Vadi video stuff. The way I'm putting it is selling this story short. for it. Plus, his music is very unlike anything else in the game. Unlike the loud, bombastic orchestra that you're used to, it starts off super quiet and barely escalates, reflecting how far Artorias has fallen since his failed attempt at destroying Manus. The fight itself is admittedly basic compared to some of the other bosses on this list, but honestly, it really doesn't need to be anything more than that. Even with only one good arm, he's more than capable of wiping the floor with you if your dodge skills aren't up to snuff, which they damn well better be if you're taking this game's DLC on. Though you notice that his fighting style is centered on his own unique style with his crazy flips and acrobatics that will eventually influence the fighting style of the Abysswalkers in Dark Souls 3, though where he differentiates is with his corruption gauge, I'll call it. When he takes a certain amount of damage, he envelops himself in darkness, buffing himself if you just sit there and let him, and the amount of damage he does after just one buff is absurd, and if you let him buff himself too much, he can basically one-shot you. He's also arguably the easiest fight in the DLC, but it nevertheless feels satisfying whenever you finally put him down for good. This fight, unfortunately, does have a couple minor issues that keep it from reaching masterpiece territory for me like it does for a lot of other fans. His gimmick of powering himself up really only works for the first time player, but once you find out that attacking him snaps him out of it, he doesn't really become too much of a threat besides that. That, and he gets absolutely cheesed by Poise Beast builds, more than any other boss in the DLC, which is a shame because this fight could have been a 10 out of 10 as opposed to an 8.5 out of 10 in my book. But that's still a very good place to be, especially when other bosses in the first game rarely reach 7 out of 10. You fought valiantly, brave warrior Gwyn. Now it's time to rest, for your memory shall live on. Out of all the bosses on this list, I feel that my opinions on the choices for Elden Ring are going to be the most contentious and controversial. Not just because the game came out earlier this year, but most fans seem to be split down the middle with a lot of this game's bosses. I really like some fights like the fight against Malekith, but some people seem to despise him due to his absurd damage output. And that's perfectly fair, honestly. In fact, the fight against Mohg seems to be the one that has people split down the middle the most. At the very end of one of the most beautiful, if most disgusting levels in the game, the top of Mohgwyn Palace houses this, I don't even know what the fuck. And then this hideous looking motherfucker that looks like a final boss in a Doom game rises out of a puddle of blood. He says that Miquella is his and his alone. And I'm standing here just like, dude, I don't fucking care. I just want the trophy for killing you, you ugly ass bitch. Now actually, this is the same fight as Mohg the Omen. Wow, who would have guessed? Who you can fight under Leyndell Capital, assuming you know where to find him. This fight is the same, but this fight is much harder. Like, I'd go so far as to say he's like top 5 hardest Soulsborne bosses in the series. At least the ones I fought anyway. I still haven't beaten Sekiro. But this fight is just so cool. He has a giant trident, top 10 trident wielders anyone, please tell Green Scorpion to get on that shit. And obviously it gives him a ton of reach and it hurts like a motherfucker. But just like his brother Margit, he has a thing where he likes to throw you off with his weird timings and you really have to be on your toes with how you dodge. He also has blood magic where he claws at the air and either throws blood at you or causes giant explosions. And apparently his slashes breach dimensions and he's actually causing gashes into a god from another dimension and using its blood to attack you. That's one of the edgiest things I've ever heard in my life, and I can't help but think that's also kind of badass. But over the course of the fight, he casts 3 rings around you, and when he casts 3 around you, he starts stealing your blood to heal himself, and he grows giant-ass wings. And whenever he hits phase 2, God help you. His attacks not only hit harder, but they leave flaming pools of blood on the ground that cause damage and bleed build up over time, because Elden Ring likes to make you cry. It's like fighting Wario in Ultimate. Even with a maximum amount of flasks, you have to treat this fight as if you have 3 less flasks than normal, because you need to burn through them just to survive the transition into phase 2. But you can find Mohg Shackle that helps with the Nihil bullshit if that helps. Also, does anyone else find it weird that the Lord of Blood suffers from blood loss? Now, I love this fight personally because it's hard as balls, obviously. This fight took me almost an hour to finally beat him if you were curious, but it's one of the most satisfying thrill rides I've had in a Soulsborne game to this day. Plus, he has probably my favorite music in the entire game. Kudos to Shoy Miyazawa, sorry if I butchered your name, for your contribution. This song is great. My only problem with the boss is where he thrusts his spear into the ground like so. Sometimes it does a decent amount of damage to my health, but other times I get one shot by it and I don't really understand why. He really gets the blood flowing, as it were, and I look forward to fighting this boss again and again the next time I play through Elden Ring.
I can see it, as clear as day. The coming of the Hobble Dynasty.
Wow, huge shocker, we have another DS3 boss and arguably the most famous boss in the original game, the Nameless King. First of all, the method of summoning this guy is honestly hilarious. The way the game just says, don't ring the bell you dingus or we'll fucking die! You say fuck that shit and, oh, I shouldn't have rung the bell after all. Gwyn's long-lost Forgotten decides to show up and hand you your dumbass on a silver platter. The Storm King isn't really that bad. It's a big-ass dinosaur chicken that blasts you with fire, and the king himself smacks you around like he's on a golf ball. Wait, did I really write that? It's fine enough, but his one part where he flies around can cause the first phase to drag on a bit. And you do have to kill the Storm King itself every time you die so you can get another chance to fight the king himself. But oh man, the fight against the Nameless King himself is spectacular. This is easily the hardest boss in the main game, unless you're Sean Albino. A lot of people like to pretend this boss isn't good or hard anymore because he's since been outclassed by other bosses in the game's DLC. Before, I would have agreed, but thinking about it, and during my third playthrough, I'm like, nah, he still brings the thrills and holds the honor of being one of the most badass fights in the series. He just slowly walks around letting you know that he's one motherfucker you don't want to take lightly. Flying around like Superman with large spear swings, combos require different roll timings, and just a tip to not get the tip, don't think you're safe from him when he finishes a combo. You know, just saying. Also, remember that Gwyn used lightning to pierce dragon scales but didn't in the actual fight himself? Well, Gwyn Jr. himself uses that to his advantage and he stomps in order to bring down the thunder. I am owning that joke and I won't be seeing myself out, thank you very much. Now, I've beaten this boss fight 3 times up to this point, but he still gives me trouble every time I fight him. But just like Mohg, no matter how many times he whoops me, it's always a thrill taking him head on, and even if he has gotten slightly power crept in terms of difficulty, it's still one of the most satisfying fights in the game for me. Take a shot every time I say satisfying. And he would be top 5 until you realize that his dive attack causes the camera to freak out, and sometimes that occasional fuckery can mess you up. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a problem, but it doesn't really happen enough to knock him below the top 6. I still love this fight, and I'd gladly play through Dark Souls 3 again just to have a rematch against the king. Dark Souls 3's bosses are just so goddamn good. If you had to ask me, and you did because the script dictates that you did, what my opinion the best dragon boss in Soulsborne is, I would have had a hard time answering that question back in the day. You have your misses like the Dragon God, Guardian Dragon, and the Ancient Dragon from Dark Souls 2, amongst many other bullshit. Then you had your hits like Calamite, Sin the Slumbering Dragon, Dark Eater Midear, and the hits were not only good, but they were really good. And Elden Ring has definitely given us some fantastic ones. But for me, the best dragon boss in Elden Ring doubles as not only my favorite dragon boss, but probably my favorite boss fight in Elden Ring as a whole, Dragonlord Placidusax. Now I'm just going to call him Dragonlord from now on because it's easier for me to type out and because I'm lazy AF. So first of all, how the fuck was anyone supposed to find this bastard without using a guide? You're supposed to jump down this very specific and hard to find ledge, fall down some platforms, then force yourself to take a nap when you get next to a tornado. You know, the sensible thing to do in a twister infested area. At least the fight itself is very much worth the walk back. First of all, I love the image of this majestic creature just floating there in the middle of the arena with constant lightning strikes in the background. Again, further proof that Farm Ozala has the best atmosphere in the game. Dragonlord has a lot of the same trappings that you'd expect from a dragon boss. He breathes fire, flies around, swipes at you, you know, the usual dragon shit. And as other dragon bosses in this game have shown off, this game has a hard on for dragons with lightning powers. As for that giant ass dragon with a fucking lightsaber wasn't a dead giveaway, but Dragonlord proves that he's the master as his very roars send powerful lightning all over the arena. And later in the fight, he vanishes into the clouds and reappears to attack you with lightning infused claw swipes. He may not summon lightsabers, but he has quite possibly the most badass attack in the entire franchise. It's a giant ass AoE that can probably one-shot you. I haven't tried, so don't ask, but the first time I saw that flash of lightning, my jaw hit the floor so hard that I had to have facial surgery to have it sewn back on. Plus, it has something I don't think I've ever seen FromSoft do before in any other boss that I remember, and that's the use of dynamic sound design. When he activates the attack, the music just fades out with nothing but the sounds of powerful sparks and piercing moans from the electricity, followed by an ear-ringing explosion as the music fades back in. It's so amazing, I'm surprised it took him this long to do something like that. The second reason he's my favorite dragon boss fight is, I just think he's a fun ass fight, alright? It took them a long time since Demon Souls to give us a masterful dragon boss, and I think this one hits the sweet spot with all of them. He isn't as brutally tanky like Midear, nor does he fly around so much that the fight sometimes drags like Sin or the Storm King. It took them a while to perfect the formula for dragon bosses, and not only did they do it with this boss fight, they did it better than I could have ever hoped. Also, you may have noticed that he has 5 necks around his body, but only 2 heads. Maybe it's possible that we could get DLC for Elden Ring and one of the bosses is the Dragonlord in his prime? Man, I'm drooling just thinking about it. For those of you wondering what the Bloodborne bosses are, well, here's your time to shine. Bloodborne is arguably the GOAT, and rightfully so. This was the first Soulsborne that I ever finished, and it holds a spot in my top 10 favorite games of all time. One of the reasons, besides the amazing lore and music, would be the boss battles, especially the DLC ones. And with that, I just spoiled the next couple of slots on the list, so get ready to get angry at who I put lower than the rest. First of all, Lady Maria. Now, one thing you gotta know is that trying to pick the order for the top 4 was pretty difficult. Okay, who am I kidding? No, it wasn't. Y'all knew she was gonna be on here. Not to say that she's not deserving of the top 5, she absolutely is. It's just that I feel that she's got a lot of competition and I just like the next 3 better. Yeah, great excuse, right? But yeah, take the fight with Gehrman, give her twin swords instead of a giant-ass scythe, make the fight 10 times harder, and you've got Lady Maria. Hell, she may be the hardest human boss in Souls history. She's got her sword swings and combos that are surprisingly hard to dodge given how fast she is, attacks where she can leap at you from halfway across the stage, and by the way, she hits pretty damn hard. Though, you should be used to that by now given that she's the halfway point of the DLC. Though she really isn't that much harder than Gehrman. At first, anyway. It's when she hits close to half health where she, IDKY, stabs herself in the chest, giving her sword's bloodbending properties. I mean, yeah, sure, Bloodborne is full of crazy psychos, and I guess she wanted to be considered as Girl Sephiroth because look at the range on these attacks now. Seriously, good luck trying to find any openings without getting sliced up by blood. That is a sentence I just said in a video. And in this phase, she starts incorporating delayed swings that can one-shot you if you don't dodge or get far enough away from her before she swings. And don't even get me started on her third phase where she now leaves fire trails from her attacks, giving you even less openings to attack without getting singed. Yeah, overall, it's a fantastic boss fight. The lore that I haven't bothered touching up on, go watch Body Video. The challenge, the music, really this boss is as close to perfect as you can get, and yet it's still outclassed by 3 of the bosses on this list, in my opinion anyway. If this were the finale for the DLC, then I think it would have been a perfect one. But alas, she isn't even the final boss. So we all know that Malenia holds the title as From Software's hardest boss now, but we can at least still appreciate how hard the original champion of this title was before her. I said that Lady Maria could have been a solid finale if they wanted to go that route, but going behind the clock tower reveals another area, the fishing hamlet, one of the hardest areas in the entire game. Though I think we can all agree that those shark dudes are 100% the reason why. Fuck those guys. And at the end is this, naked creature crawling out of this dead fish thing with a sound design that's honestly a little too good. The sound of him crawling out of the corpse followed by his cries of grief never cease to give me goosebumps. In case you don't know or weren't paying attention, this fight is pretty damn hard. Easily the hardest in the game and it's not even close. He swings around his umbilical cord axe thing. Yes, that's an umbilical cord. I wish I had the imagination to make that shit up. And, big shocker for the Old Hunters DLC, he hits like a goddamn freight train. So don't be surprised if you get 2-shot by him if your vigor isn't super high. But you may find yourself getting 2-shot super easily anyway, given that he swings that damn thing everywhere like a hyperactive Nest main, delaying his swings to catch panic rolls, or interrupting your attempts at hitting him just to pee in your cornflakes. Or those stupid blood bombs that he sometimes uses to create AoEs, and given that he's the fastest enemy in the game, don't be too shocked if you find yourself dying to him at least 50 times. You really need to be patient against this dude, yet it's so intense that it gets the blood pumping flawlessly. And that's just phase 1, by the way. Get him down to half health, and all hell breaks loose. He grows wings out of nowhere, and the music goes from this calm, surreal chorus for some reason to, oh my god, this motherfucker's gonna kill me! He's faster, hops around tossing blood bombs all over the place, smacking that axe around like you're the most annoying cockroach on planet Earth, and he wants to squash you so badly, he swings around so frequently and violently that you consider yourself lucky just to get an opening, you know, without getting a riposte opportunities. He also gains a brand new attack where he screams and lights up the sky, where lightning strikes the corpse of Kos and causes an AoE across the arena. I've heard a lot of people complain about this attack, but it's well telegraphed and it gives you more than enough time to avoid it. Plus, he leaves himself the most vulnerable after using this attack. The first time I got to this boss fight in my first playthrough of the DLC, it took me over 4 hours worth of attempts just to beat him because of how brutal he is. The second playthrough of the DLC, on the other hand, I managed in less than 10 attempts, only dying to phase 2 once. That's not a knock on the fight, mind you, just goes to show how cathartic it could be playing through these games again with your muscle memory intact. That bullshit that Father Gascoigne put me through, sit the fuck down, now I'm the real boss. Lady Maria? Pfft, piss easy nowadays. Okay, that's a lie. Orphan, your first phase is easy enough to no-hit. Now time to get a taste of your real medicine, motherfucker. It wasn't easy, but both times I fought him, it was the most exhilarating adrenaline rush that FromSoft has ever delivered. And killing him was the most satisfying feeling I've ever gotten from a game in a very long time. So why is he only number 3 and not number 1? Well, it's no secret that he brings the challenge. He was the hardest Soulsborne boss for half a decade for a reason. But it's mainly because the top 2 deliver on lore just a bit more in my opinion, as unlike Lady Maria, this boss felt a bit more random and out of nowhere, and I don't really like the story's payoff for killing him. But overall, while he isn't the hardest anymore, he's still the most satisfying. And just remember that he's a newborn. Imagine how scary he'd be if he was a full-grown. So one of the reasons why Bloodborne is held in such high regard is just how messed up some of the designs of the creatures can get. The worst one, in my opinion, in the main game at least, would be the one Reborn. First time I ever saw that boss, I felt like I had to throw up. I didn't think that anything could top it. Then I went ahead and played the Old Hunters DLC, and the first 30 minutes were there to show me I was about to be proven wrong. In fact, the first boss of the DLC, oh God! What kind of sick demented hole did this abomination crawl out of? Turns out this is Ludwig, the first warrior of the Healing Church, and yep, he's definitely seen better days. Now he's devolved into a violent beast, making these ghastly shrieks in the process, showing that any humanity he once had has all but vanished at this point. Now, personally, I was prepared to make the Orphan my favorite boss in Bloodborne before my recent playthrough. The second time around, honestly, this fight is so much better than I remember. He is fast and aggressive as fuck, hitting like a truck and giving you almost no time to breathe before he's all up in your face again. Or he could just spray hot water out of that weird eyeball mouth on his shoulder. Seriously, this design is fucked up. And just to remind you, this is the first boss of the DLC. If you want to see the rest of it, you gotta go through him first. My very first attempt at the DLC years ago, I struggled against Ludwig super hard. I died to him the most times out of anyone in the game, forcing me to rage quit. Years later, I was just like, oh, you just dodge. My only problem with Ludwig now, and the reason he is number 1, is when he does this one attack where he jumps up into the ceiling, then slams down on you after a few seconds. Now you can avoid it by running then dodging at the right time, but the timing is so tricky that more often than not, you're getting one shot and squashed into a blood-soaked pancake. It just reeks of bullshit, it feels unavoidable at times, and I just hate it. But then phase 2 kicks in, and well, I know you've seen it a billion times already, but I'll just go ahead and let it play out one more time, because what's one more viewing, right?
You were at my side all along. My true mentor, my guiding moonlight.
Holy shit, the scenery. Ludwig's voice, the Moonlight Greatsword, the music transition. Unlike phase 1, I don't have a single bad thing to say about it. This second phase is perfection. He goes from flailing about on all fours to standing straight up. Well, as straight as a horseman monstrosity can anyway. His appearance has drastically altered, but he shows the swordsman's skills off like he hasn't changed one bit. He even has attacks where he shoots blade beams out of his sword and creates AoEs that keep you from getting in close. The one attack you have to be aware of in this phase is when he charges his sword, lets out a weak AoE, then slams it out into the ground, creating an energy geyser that can and will one-shot you if you aren't careful. But unlike the slam attack in phase 1, there's more than enough time to prepare for it, and it's also much easier to dodge, so I don't really mind it. Honestly, what more can I say that other people haven't? This fight is a masterpiece. The lore, the atmosphere, the gameplay for the most part, the music, oh my God, the music! It's the most viewed song out of Bloodborne's entire library of music, let alone Soul's history, for a reason. It's amazing. And Ludwig would have been my favorite Soulsborne boss if it weren't for number 1. Not as memorable as the Tower Knight, but at least it's a fun encounter with a badass design. The fight itself might be pretty damn easy, but man, the remake really does this fight justice with the improved visuals and music. Really cool design and a solid attempt at creating the perfect dragon boss, but it didn't quite hit the incredible mark for me personally. I'm putting him on here in hopes of traumatizing some of the fans out there. Now, a lot of people seem to be split down the middle, but I personally like the fight against Martyr Logarius. Really cool design, really cool atmosphere, what more could you ask for? Oh man, on to the really painful cuts. I love the lore and the arena, but the DLC just kind of power crept him to hell and back. Plus, the immense amount of competition squeezed him out a bit for me. Still an amazing fight though. I love the fight simply for being one of the best adrenaline rushes in the entire game with one of the best soundtracks, and it feels good to kill him for what he did to Vorten the Dancer. The final phase really is what's carrying the fight for me personally. Would have made it if only Elden Ring didn't exist for me to pull material from. Speaking of which... Man, talk about an amazing first impression to the demigods you'll be fighting. If only the endgame didn't have such strong competition. Probably would have been my favorite fight in the game if that Hellfire phase was less chaotic, but as is, it's an awesome fight with great music. Really cool design and atmosphere, but I feel like my opinion on the fight may change upon my second playthrough. But the fight itself is pretty cool, so honorable mention it is. And finally, the final battle of Elden Ring really holds out as an awesome finale for an awesome game. Oh, and the Elden Beast is kinda cool, if a little out of left field. Now, I'm not gonna waste too much of your time hyping it up or faking you out, you probably already know who it is, but just know that while some of you may disagree with my opinions here, I don't care. Anyways, after defeating the most pathetic DLC boss the series has ever seen, you wake up the princess from her slumber by breaking her giant-ass egg. I think that's an egg anyway, it looks kind of gross. What happens is that you get transported to this vast open wasteland, probably thinking to yourself, oh shit, I fucked up the whole world again. I mean, it's weird that it happened twice, but whatevs, right? This is Dark Souls. At the bottom of the arena, you see a hollow pleading for help, and then seeing that old guy that transported you into the painted world, you want me to come back later, my guy?
Guy's gonna give me about 45 minutes in here. I got a feeling I'm being pretty thirsty after this.
Now this scene looks very familiar now, doesn't it? Warrior formerly renowned for their battle prowess, mindlessly slaughtering creatures after going mad, the hollowed out lords in this case, then initiating the fight by flinging an impaled corpse at you. Yeah, the devs really liked the fight against Artorias so much that they tried replicating it a couple times in different games, with Ludwig and now Slave Knight Gael. The fight starts off with him running at you on all fours and swinging a sword like an angry housewife. Sound familiar? But this time you had this big ass battlefield around you to fight in, with practically zero chances of getting stuck on a wall or something. Now this first phase isn't particularly special in any way, but I do enjoy it quite a bit as it allows Dark Souls 3's combat to shine with how little lag there is between dodge rolls. But it's still quite tense since Gael is so deranged that his attacks are so unpredictable, and he hits quite hard in this phase, so you can't be caught sleeping on the wheel or else you'll get butchered. But then after a third of his health is gone, he falls down and notices that his blood is pure black, summarizing that he has the blood of the Dark Soul with him. The Dark Soul that has never been a thing up until this DLC, by the way. He gets up, starts glowing the sinister aura, and then he goes all out. Here his sword swings are followed up by him going all Doctor Strange with his damned cape trying to attack you, and his attacks are a lot harder to dodge now, though I've also noticed that his damage output has been reduced, if ever so slightly thanks to the added threat of the cape. And sometimes he pulls out a rapid fire crossbow that could deal a ton of damage if you don't start dodging like a psycho, and an attack where he throws some Rasengans in front of him that return to him after a couple seconds to catch you off guard. They're really not that bad as long as you move to a different part of the arena. It's a really fun and energetic boss fight so far, but believe it or not, it gets even crazier when he gets to his last third. He bursts out tons of Dark Souls, cute game, and starts flying around like a Super Saiyan with a sword. The music swells as the skies grow darker, lightning strikes permeate the battlefield, he combos his attacks for way longer, and some attacks have more souls fly off of him just to home in on you. Seriously, did Hideki Kamiya help with this boss fight? Yeah, if Platinum Games helped develop Dark Souls 3, then the first boss will be something a lot like this. I don't know what to tell you, I love this fight so much. Even after all the bosses I've talked about, this is the one that has everything I love about the other fights combined. It's not the absolute hardest fight in the series, to be fair, but it's still a very good challenge that's incredibly satisfying to conquer. He doesn't have the best lore, but I still felt bad about killing him and taking the blood to his niece afterwards. The music isn't my absolute favorite, but it's still pretty fantastic. And the reason he's number one is that I just find him to be the most fun. I actually let him kill me in one attempt where I got close to winning, just so I can keep fighting him because he's just that fun to me. Perhaps the most disappointing thing about Elden Ring is that they haven't made a boss this good since this overgrown lawn gnome. It's my video, my opinion, but Slave Knight Gael is my favorite boss in Souls history, and Gael himself is up there with fights like the Masked Lumen Sage, Devil May Cry 5 Virgil, Liquid Ocelot, and Zanza as some of my favorite bosses in all of gaming. I'm the Awesome Yojimbo, and thank you guys for watching and not calling me a Sunburn Albino ripoff. Subversion of expectations. Anyways, we talked about the best of the Souls history. Next time, we need to talk about those bosses. great for me.